My name is Linda Cirulli-Burton, and welcome to this channel named Above the Battleground, ACIM. So for this video, I wanted to do a deep dive, or at least a deeper dive, into that beautiful phrase found in the Gospel of St. John, to be in this world and not of it. Now that phrase also shows up in A Course in Miracles 6 different times. Now I'm well aware that the interpretation of that phrase is probably open to discussion. Certainly spiritual traditions that advocate or have parts of them that advocate separation from the physical material world, certainly I can appreciate that perspective. So it would mean in essence that this is a world of illusion, it is a world of darkness, it is a world of hate and judgment. Therefore the best thing to do is to pull ourselves out of this illusory world, separate ourselves. Now, I appreciate that, and yet I could say that could never have worked for me. Trust me on this. In fact, when I was in Israel and I went to the Qumran archaeological site, this is where the Essenes lived, the ascetic group. And quite famous, of course, for the Dead Sea Scrolls. And you're walking around and you're seeing the caves and you're seeing the desert. And I got in trouble with my guide because I said, well, now, this just doesn't seem right to me. Separating yourself so that this just doesn't seem right. And I'll never forget, our Israeli guide said to me, well, that's your opinion. And I went, ooh. It is. It's my opinion. So anyway, I wanted to truly understand from the teachings of A Course in Miracles, and perhaps you might agree regarding your own spiritual path, if this is not yours, that there may be another interpretation for that phrase, to be in this world and not of it. So Above the Battleground is based on the teachings of a spiritual self-study path known as A Course in Miracles. I decided to create these little videos in order to share some of the lessons, some of the observations, that with the intention that they would go deeper inside me and maybe be of some assistance to you regardless of what your spiritual path might be. To prepare for this presentation, I studied a few different sources. The Lighthouse Anthology, published by the Foundation for A Course in Miracles. In fact, there is an article in it written by Ken Wapnick with this title, To Be in the World and Not of It. And it became sort of the foundational study that I would make with this. Also, I found in the Q&A, the student-generated questions, also published by the Foundation for A Course in Miracles, I found a question related to jury duty, which the answer really was amazing. And so I felt that it should be included in this particular topic, and I hope you will agree. The other source material was Ken Wapnick's CD of Hamlet. Ken and I love Shakespeare. And in that CD, I remember he said something that knocked my socks off. And like years later, I knew it was there. I knew I got knocked off, and I wanted to find it. And the CD reappeared. So those sources really helped me put together this little video. We often speak about the world of illusion, this illusory body in the world of illusion. But you know what? It's pretty darn hard to deny the existence of a body in the world of senses. A Course in Miracles doesn't ask us to do that. Instead, I want to say to you that this is what can make life very exciting, is when instead we turn it into a classroom. And the classroom is such that as we encounter circumstances, events, particular people that drive us into darkness, the temptation to go into the darkness, but then to choose again. The darkness, I have a decision maker in my mind who can choose the voice of the ego or the voice of the spirit. I can make that decision in my mind. Now, what is very difficult for many of us to get our arms around is the fact that the Course in Miracles, it's only about the mind, only the mind, so that I can go into my right mind, my mind filled up with light, and I look at stuff with Jesus or the Holy Spirit, and then what happens is, well, I'm going to tell you that you won't always know what is going to happen regarding your behavior or the words that come out of your mouth, because this spiritual path has nothing to do with your behavior, which would be a form that you could see, that you could hear. It's not what it's about. What instead, think about this regardless of what spiritual path you're on. What if instead you know that in your mind you have chosen love, and then you walk out? Oh my gosh, behaviorally you have gone into peace, and then you walk out of the room and you leave the people. Maybe you do that. Maybe you say something that's very abrupt, and perhaps some people would take it as hurtful. But you've gone into a place of peace. And the reason why I tell you this is because I think this is a very confusing thing for a lot of us to get our arms around, that the form is not necessarily what you and I would think. So, for example, I mentioned to you that I found a question, number 483 in the Q&A, and it was all about, should I not accept jury duty? I want to be wonderful, and I want to be loving and kind, and now I'm going to be catapulted into a situation where I have to judge another human being, where punishment is going to be meted out in this world of ego. I don't know. I don't think I should be on the jury. But anyway, the answer, I thought, was just so wonderful. So if you'll be patient with me while I locate this on my iPad. The confusion of form and content. For, as I just mentioned to you, you could have the content of pure love, and the form, a lot of people go, really now? And this is what the answer was. The confusion of form and content. The Course never takes a position one way or another on form, that is, on specific activities or behaviors. Jesus is only ever concerned with content, whether our mind is listening to the voice of the ego or the voice for God. And that is the distinction between coming from a place of anger and attack or a place of gentleness and peace in your mind. Sometimes one of the most helpful classrooms for learning the Holy Spirit's lessons of forgiveness is one in which the ground rules seem almost blatantly to represent the ego's arena of judgment and guilt. For whatever the ego has made for separation and attack, the Holy Spirit instead can use it for healing. And so the answer goes on to talk about when you go there, when you go into your courtroom, watch all the judgments start percolating up in your mind. You might not like the judge. You don't like his or her haircut. You don't like it. You don't like the plaintiff. You don't like the defendant. You don't even like your fellow jurors. Watch all this stuff coming up. And what's so fascinating is that as you watch it gurgle, bubble, if you will, that is your clue. That's your clue that you are in your ego mind. It really is very clear. So if I am gurgling and bubbling up, and then I decide I will look at it from the mind of light instead of the mind of ego, that's, you know what the ego mind does. Maybe things would be different. So let me just see. A courtroom can be transformed in your mind from a place of condemnation and punishment to one of genuine compassion and recognition of shared interests, regardless of the specific verdict, guilty or not guilty, that the jury, including yourself, delivers. How is this possible? The key, as already noted, is to focus on the content of your mind and not the specific form you are participating in. And this is usually a process in which you first become aware of all the ego judgments that the situation is bringing up in you. There are so many opportunities for judgments. And then what you can do is distinguish between judgment as condemnation and judgment simply as discernment. To evaluate the facts and circumstances of a case and to draw conclusions about whether a defendant has in fact done what he or she has been accused of need not involve condemnation. To find someone guilty in the court of law is simply to conclude that the person is responsible for the charges brought against him or her. Any interpretation about the unworthiness and sinfulness of that individual as a function of the decision is the gratuitous addition of the ego. And I have to say, I found that fascinating. Remember that the mind for spirit, the mind of God, has the ability to choose compassion, to look at that, we're all in this, we are the same. I exist in the ego mind, I exist in the mind of God, and so do you. So I love that. Judgment as discernment, a way to live, a way to be in the world and not of it. Ultimately, I wanted to also say that when Ken Wapnick did his analysis of Hamlet, and of course, it's a very dark and dreary play. I mean, I know a lot of people of all of Shakespeare's plays, I know it's the longest. It's not my favorite, but a lot of people really love that play. And what he did is he went through every single one of the characters and how Hamlet, instead of hatred and jealousy and anger and all of those wonderful attractive words that we can use in the ego mind, that he could have looked at his mom from a perspective of her own loneliness, perhaps choosing to be with Claudius, and then he went through every single one of the characters and said that maybe at the end the new king wouldn't have become the new king because everybody was dead. Fortinbras, I think that was his name, Fortinbras. And I had to laugh. So Ophelia, Hamlet could have looked at Ophelia by flipping the switch and not one way, but looking at her from another way. I'm telling you, he was incredible. So I think that it is very, very possible to be in this world and not of it. If we use it as a classroom, if we use it as a way to look at our stuff as it comes up, looking at it from the perspective of the loving Jesus, the Holy Spirit, let it go. We all have it. We all have the mind that is the ego mind, the spirit mind, and we all have a decision maker. We can make a different choice. And anyway, it was a wonderful experience for me to put this together, and I hope that you got something out of it. All right, thank you so much for joining me, and we'll see you again soon.